Begin this morning with the Trump administration's ongoing legal battle over the deportation of immigrants. A Maryland judge is now weighing contempt proceedings against the administration. She says the government has failed to provide evidence that it's working to bring home a man who was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador. Now, this follows an order from the judge for government officials to, quote, facilitate his return, an order partially affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was sent to El Salvador over what the Justice Department has called an administrative error. The White House claims without evidence that he's a member of the violent gang MS-13. Abrego Garcia has no criminal record in the U.S. or in El Salvador. As the administration defends its decision to deport him, Abrego Garcia's family is now pleading for his return.
I will not stop fighting until I see my husband alive. Our children are asking, when would you come home? And I pray for the day I tell them the time and date that you'll return.
NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos join us now for more on this. Good morning to both of you. Gary, let's start with you. I mean, this judge was clear yesterday. She wants to move quickly on this case. You were at the courthouse. Walk us through what happened in the hearing and where things now go from here.
So this all boils down to, Joe, the judge asked the government to do something. She's found that the government hasn't done that. So she's trying to get the information a different way, and that's through sworn declarations and document requests. She has asked the Trump administration to provide 4 officials from DHS and ICE to provide 3 pieces of information. 1, Abrego Garcia's custodial status, his location, his well-being. 2, what steps the government has taken to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the U.S. And then 3, what additional steps the government will take and when to facilitate that return. And as you said, Judge Zinnes wants to move quickly here. She hopes that 2 weeks from today, she can be in a place where she can review all of this information and figure out if the government has been acting in good faith to comply with her orders or not. And if she finds they haven't been, that's where we could get into contempt proceedings. Now, in the hearing yesterday, she said, quote, there will be no tolerance for gamesmanship or grandstanding. Joe?
So, Danny, this case is a real test of the limits of presidential power. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat, he had this to say about the administration yesterday.
They need to comply with the Supreme Court's directive, or the Supreme Court needs to enforce its order aggressively, which should include contempt.
So you mentioned on the show yesterday, judges generally don't like to hold people in contempt of court, but the judge's tone really did seem to shift yesterday. Talk about why we usually don't see judges hold people in contempt, but where this case could go from here.
Oh, judges hold people in contempt, and I've been threatened with it myself, so I know. But what judges do not want to do, I believe, is try to hold somebody in this administration in contempt, because then you get into a really tricky issue of chain of command. Who is actually responsible? I believe that's why you see judges in what I would say is a pretty clear instance of contempt, not so much because of violation of an order, but because the judge is not getting the answers that the judge wants. To me, the better case for contempt is the administration's representative sort of coming into court and saying, well, I don't know anything about this. I see no evil. I hear no evil. Those kinds of answers might be more likely to result in contempt. But you get back to the fundamental issue of who in the world, who in the country, I should say, do you hold in contempt? Because everybody involved has a boss except one person, and that's the president. So
let's talk about the president. Amid all this, he had an interview with Fox Noticias yesterday. He said he's looking into deporting more people to El Salvador's prisons. That includes those he's calling homegrown criminals. Here's some of what he had to say.
Could we use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals?
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
The ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that.
All right, so what he's suggesting there, is there any way that's legal at all?
Just in my opinion, after 8+ years of Trump, whenever I hear we're looking into it, it means that no one's actually started looking into it. He's just saying words that are coming out of his mouth. Legally, he would run into a lot of trouble trying to deport people who are citizens of the United States. However, what we have also found is that the Trump administration is very good at finding loopholes. Abrego Garcia is a fantastic example. The Trump administration mistakenly sent him to El Salvador, and now they're claiming, well, too late, too bad, so sad, we can't possibly get him back because he's in another country outside of the jurisdiction. And just going back to Hakeem Jeffries' comments, he talks about the Supreme Court enforcing its own order. I would caution that he's misreading the way that the Trump administration looks at that order. The Trump administration believes it is complying with the Supreme Court's order, and they believe the Supreme Court's order stands for executive power, not forcing the Trump administration to do anything.
All right, Gary, one more question for you. As part of Trump's crackdown on immigration, the federal government is now transferring 110,000 acres along the border with Mexico to the U.S. Army. Tell us, how's this land going to be used?
Well, the Trump administration hopes it's going to be used to detain migrants who are crossing the border from Mexico. They're transferring a 60-foot wide piece of land that goes from New Mexico all the way to California to use as an Army base. So they're transferring it to the U.S. Army. Now, traditionally, we don't use the U.S. Army in this country for domestic law enforcement because there's a federal law against that happening. But if the Army is being used to provide security for the Army base, that is how they can get around that. Again, you were mentioning loopholes. This appears to be a loophole in this case. Now, this is sure to face some legal challenges. It has not gone into effect yet, guys.
Lots of legal challenges. Gary, thank you so much. Danny's going to stick around because we have more legal questions for him. That's because new questions are being raised in another high-profile deportation case, one that could have major implications for freedom of speech in this country. NBC News has uncovered concerning details about some of the claims the Trump administration is making in its immigration case against Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil. Now, he's the Columbia University grad student who was arrested last month. He's facing deportation after playing a key role in pro-Palestinian protests on campus last year. After reviewing more than 100 pages of documents from the case, NBC News found that in some instances, the government appears to be relying on unverified tabloid articles as evidence against him. This revelation comes just a couple days after a judge cleared the way for Khalil, a U.S. permanent resident, to be deported on the grounds that his beliefs are allegedly a threat to national security. Chloe Atkins is an investigative reporter with the NBC News National Security and Law Unit. She joins us now along with NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas, sticking around to help us break down this case. Chloe, let's start with your reporting. What documents were you looking at here, and what did you find that is raising some red flags?
So the evidence that I reviewed in the last 48 hours, it really gave us some crucial insight into the evidence that the government is using against Khalil in his deportation case taking place in Louisiana. And of course, as it relates to Khalil being a national security threat, we all know about Secretary of State Marco Rubio's memo that said that his activities were anti-Semitic and that his presence in the U.S. is a threat to foreign policy. But in the new evidence that I reviewed, it looks at the second ground of removal, which is that he allegedly omitted certain work experience from his permanent residency application. So in doing so, they relied on heavily unverified tabloid articles and a super shaky timeline. So in one instance, they looked at several articles from the New York Post that said he held a certain title at a nonprofit, when in fact he was actually an intern and received student credit, or class credit, I should say, with Columbia University, which was included in his application to the government. And in another instance, we've really seen the government hone in that he didn't include his being involved in the protest movements on Columbia University in his permanent residency application, when in fact those tabloid articles that they were relying on were published in April 2024, which was a month after he filed his application with the government. And so, Joe, what we are seeing here is we are seeing evidence that is being put forward that is easily disproven by simply looking back at Khalil's past work contracts, as well as letters from Columbia University verifying that he received class credit. And so that is really the big takeaway here, Joe.
So, Danny, after the immigration judge in Louisiana ruled the government can deport Khalil recently, he spoke directly to the judge. He said, in part, I would like to quote what you said last time, that there's nothing that's more important to this court than due process rights and fundamental fairness. Clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of these principles were present today or in this whole process. So when you look at the evidence that's being presented to remove him, is what Chloe uncovered concerning from a legal point, or are the standards different because this is an immigration court?
The second thing you said, and Chloe's done some great reporting on this topic, but here's the thing. It may not matter that much that the evidence the government has amassed against Khalil may be flimsy, it may not be compelling, it may even be completely hearsay, because the immigration law allows the Secretary of State, if in his opinion believes there is some reasonable adverse foreign policy consequences. So the quantum of evidence that we're talking about, while I would never tolerate it in a criminal case if the burden is beyond a reasonable doubt, if the evidence must pass the relevancy and other tests of evidence, then we might be talking. But if the standard under the law is, hey, does the Secretary of State think I'm bad for foreign policy? Well, then the question becomes, what is the evidence that is required? And here's the tricky part. Once again, the Trump administration is masterful at dusting off these rarely used parts of federal law. I mean, as a criminal defense lawyer, I've looked at the other parts of this law many times. For example, if a client is here legally, they can be removed if they get a criminal conviction. What most criminal defense attorneys and attorneys in general never look at is the section in which the Secretary of State can remove you if he thinks you have adverse foreign policy consequences. Why? Because it's never happened. But the Trump administration, again, very good at finding these dusty tomes of law that they can use to their benefit.
So, Chloe, with all this in mind, what do Khalil's lawyers plan to do next?
So in the interim, Joe, they will continue to file evidence debunking the government's allegations of anti-Semitism. And in one instance, they've already filed a CNN article from last year where Khalil is quoted saying that there's no room for anti-Semitism or racism on Columbia's campus amidst the height of the protests. Now, his attorneys do have until April 23rd next week to file for relief after an immigration judge last week said that he could be deported. So again, they're going to continue to file additional evidence, have additional hearings, and in the meantime, Khalil will remain in the U.S., Joe.
So, Danny, are there broader implications here for other green card holders or even just U.S. citizens based on what happens with this case here?
Well, I think the first thing that green card holders should know, and many of them do know, but maybe everybody should know, is that just having a green card is not complete immunity from removal. And the other issue, too, is we need to figure out the contours of federal law that allows people who are here to be removed if there is some foreign policy concern by the Secretary of State. What does that mean? What are the limits? Khalil's case is proceeding on two tracks before an immigration law judge, which folks need to understand. Immigration judges are part of the executive branch. They're not Article III judges. They are not part of the judicial branch. Meanwhile, he's got a habeas petition in New Jersey before a district court judge. Yes, an Article III judge. He's got two tracks going. His habeas petition is probably his best shot at staying in the country. So watch New Jersey closely.
All right, Danny, lots of questions here. Thank you for helping us answer them. Chloe, thank you for your outstanding reporting. We appreciate it. Now, students and faculty members at Harvard University are praising the school for taking a stand against the Trump administration. On Monday, Harvard flatly rejected a set of demands from the White House demanding policy changes. The Trump administration wants the school to change things like admissions and hiring practices for its academic programs. Another demand that the school audit the viewpoints of its student body. The Trump administration has since frozen more than $2 billion worth of funding and threatened to strip the school of its tax-exempt status. Other schools like Stanford and Yale have come out in support of Harvard. Well, former President Barack Obama called the funding freeze unlawful. NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis joins us now from Harvard. So, Rahima, it does look like students and staff support Harvard's decision to push back against these demands by the Trump administration, something we weren't seeing other universities do. What are you hearing from them?
We're hearing what you mentioned in the fact that there's been pushback here at Harvard University, and students and faculty here say that they are delighted by this pushback because without it, to them, it appears as though the Trump administration is attempting to take over the operation of this university, and they find themselves in an unprecedented kind of challenge. We talked to a history professor here at Harvard University who said it's something that's not just happening at Harvard University, but at universities across the country. Take a listen.
We're in a situation that we in America never thought that we would find ourselves in. That is a situation that my colleagues would call democratic backsliding, or that we might call more generally a slide into autocracy. The attack on the universities is not simply an attack on higher education, though it is frontally that. It's an attack on civil society and any kind of critical opposition to the agenda of this administration. We've been here almost 400 years. We've survived revolution, civil war, 2 world wars, a Great Depression, and many other recent blows. I think Harvard will outlive the 4 years of this presidency.
They certainly do hope that they can outlast the 4 years of the Trump administration, but they are continuing to say here at Harvard University that they certainly hope the administration of this university holds out and pushes back on what the Trump administration is demanding of them.
Yeah, still, Rahim, I mean, they're facing this funding freeze, the possible removal of tax-exempt status. I mean, what kind of impact could all of that have on Harvard right away?
Well, let me show you the front page of the Boston Globe. It talks about Trump presses harder on Harvard and court battle likely. Within this newspaper this morning, Joe, they're talking about the fact that there was a there's a student, not a student, but a researcher with Harvard University Medical School who was doing research in tuberculosis funding. And her research, she woke up yesterday morning and found out that $60 million in research has been taken away. She was told to stop. There was another researcher in radiology at Harvard here and described the situation as cautious terror. This is how they're feeling about the funding being frozen. And because they're saying it's not just research that increases the stature of Harvard University, this is research about doing things that advances medical research to benefit everyone in the country and potentially around the world. And so they see it as a profound attack on the academic pursuit of this university and also the medical pursuit that they're engaged in that could be a benefit to everyone, Joe.
So, Rahim, I mentioned former President Trump is calling this funding freeze unlawful, and that begs the question, what's next? Is this a fight that Harvard is expected to take to the courts?
It does seem so that Harvard is ready to do that, in part because people talk about the fact that Harvard has more than a $50 billion endowment, and some are suggesting it doesn't matter whether you get funding from the federal government. But as we were told yesterday by a Harvard law professor, that money is earmarked for specific things. People have given money to the university and appointed it to go in a particular direction. And they cannot, by law, just take that money and use it for something else to make up for the funding that might be taken from the Trump administration. So we've learned that the Harvard University has hired 2 very highly respected lawyers who are highly respected and well known in conservative legal circles. And there is the expectation that this university is definitely going to push back against the Trump administration demands in the courts.
Yeah, Harvard probably has access to some good attorneys, I'm guessing. All right, Rahima Ellis reporting from Harvard. Thank you so much. Former President Biden made his first public remarks since leaving office in January, rebuking the Trump administration's handling of Social Security. Mr. Biden spoke yesterday at a conference for disability advocates in Chicago. He said President Trump's Social Security cuts were already putting the entitlement program in peril for millions of deserving Americans.
Social Security is more than a government program. It's a sacred promise. We made it a sacred promise. Fewer than 100 days, this new administration has made done so much damage and so much destruction. It's kind of breathtaking.
During the speech, Mr. Biden did not address President Trump by name, referring to him only as this guy. Now to some breaking news overnight. The suspect in Tuesday's shooting at a Dallas area high school is now in custody. That news comes from the Dallas Independent School District, which also says the investigation is ongoing. At least 4 people were injured in this shooting. Now many are asking questions about security at a school where this has happened before. NBC News correspondent Jay Gray reports.
We got an active shooter, Wilmer Hutchins High School.
Panic and chaos inside a Dallas high school.
Oh man, the kids were just running out, all of them.
They were running out in fours, man, just hundreds of kids running out.
Teachers rushing to lock doors and hiding with students as the gunshots ring out.
I saw him walk by, and then like 2 seconds later, I heard like 6 shots, and then the teacher ran to the door and closed it and told us to hide in the corner.
Parents getting heartbreaking messages from their kids trapped inside.
She texted us and telling us that she loved us, like that if anything happened to her, that she was just letting us know that she loved us.
This shooting, just a year and 3 days after a shooting at the same high school last year, injured a student.
This is going on too much at this school. Last year, my oldest son was a senior here, and it was a shooting. Now he's here, same thing going on. It's ridiculous.
Somebody was shot in the cafeteria.
4 students were injured, 3 with gunshot wounds. Officials say the school is now secure, but students are still overwhelmed.
I heard one of my classmates say that they saw a bullet had came through our door window. So like that's when my heart really sunk. And I'm sorry.
And asking questions.
I feel like the security, they weren't really like doing their job at the moment because how would the gun get in the school in the first place?
Our thanks to Jay Gray for that report. The school district says mental health resources will be available for anyone who needs them. Classes are scheduled to resume there next week. This morning, we're getting a look at newly released body cam video surrounding the deaths of actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa. Now, this footage from February shows the moments officers made the gruesome discovery and the conditions inside their New Mexico home. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has more.
Yeah, he's down. He's been down for a while. Gene Hackman, the actor.
For the first time since the shocking death of legendary actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa, we're seeing the moment officers, at times with guns drawn, checked every room of the couple's Santa Fe, New Mexico home, making the grim discovery.
So I think this is where he was sleeping because there's blood on the pillow and on the mattresses and on the bedspread.
Hackman, who investigators say died of heart failure February 18th, lived nearly a week inside the home with his wife's body.
He's guarding her.
Arakawa was in a bathroom guarded by the couple's German Shepherd.
The dog growled at him.
Along with their deceased dog Zinna, who was still in her kennel.
They've been dead for a few weeks.
It only takes 3 days without water for a dog to die. Yeah.
An autopsy later revealing Arakawa died of the rare hantavirus, a respiratory illness spread through infected rodents.
That don't make sense because she was young. She took care of him.
No, 100%.
According to an environmental assessment, no rodents were found in the main house, but rodent droppings were found in several other buildings of the property. We're also seeing surveillance video the last time Arakawa was seen in public. Here, she's shopping and wearing a face mask. New case reports revealing Arakawa also sent an email that morning to cancel her massage appointment, writing, "So G woke up today with cold flu-like symptoms, did a COVID test, negative." And on her laptop, an investigator says she Googled breathing techniques and on Amazon purchased Boost Oxygen canisters.
No, that's strange.
Dana Griffin, NBC News.
Time now for your morning news now weather. The Rockies are bracing for another round of winter weather, which just seems to keep hanging around. Meteorologist Angie Lassman's tracking everything for us. Angie, good morning.
Hi, Joe. Good morning to you. We've got this next storm system that's going to move across the country, and we've also got some chilly conditions across the east continuing and the west running away warm. We're talking 10 to 20 degrees above average for the west and 10 to 20 degrees below average for the east. Ann Arbor, one of those spots coming in at just 53 degrees today. 60s expected for Baltimore. Meanwhile, the Central Plains expected to feel like summer. 90 degrees for Dodge City, upper 70s across Omaha today, low 70s for Bismarck. I mean, we are running way warm for this time of year, and that goes for tomorrow too. High 80s for that same section of the country, and then we'll start to kind of moderate out for the east, and then that warmth really settles in here as we get into our weekend. New York City expected to hit 77 degrees on Saturday. We've got the high 70s on Friday in Cincinnati. So some milder, more spring-like conditions expected, but we do have this next storm system that we're going to track that could leave us with some snow and potentially strong storms to deal with as we head into our holiday weekend. Here's a look at tomorrow. Snow across the Rockies, those storms across parts of the Midwest, specifically Nebraska, Iowa. Notice that bullseye of slight risk is right centered across Des Moines and Omaha. We will see hail as the main threat, but of course we can't rule out those damaging winds and a couple of isolated tornadoes too. Looking ahead to Friday, that snow continues for the southern Rockies and the severe threat expands. Now we're talking from Michigan to Texas. We've got a bunch of major cities in there, including Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, Springfield, Oklahoma City. Greatest threat, once again, is going to be the hail, but damaging winds and isolated tornadoes can't rule those out. By the time Saturday comes around, into the weekend, and we're still dealing with the same system. And now we've got a flood threat problem. We've got really saturated grounds across that region. So it's not going to take a lot for the southern and central plains to pick up some flooding concerns. And that severe risk will now extend from Pennsylvania to Texas. So some of those overlapping cities for Friday and Saturday severe potential. But we do have anywhere from Pittsburgh to Dallas dealing with the potential for some strong wind gusts, damaging hail, and even a couple of tornadoes. Rainfall-wise, tomorrow through Saturday, these are the spots that we're going to watch to see the highest rainfall. So St. Louis, West Plains, Joplin, even Dallas could pick up a couple of inches. And like I said, it won't be hard for us to see some flooding across that region. So heads up if you have any of those outdoor kind of weekend plans. You're going to be driving. I know it's a holiday weekend, so travel will be something that folks are thinking of. And speaking of travel, Joe, across the Rockies, you're going to be encountering some slick roads. Denver, one of those spots. Of course, Casper. Up to a foot in some of those highest elevations. So winter holding on.
They can still ski,
spots.
I guess, right? So
people will be happy.
There you go. That's all
we'll
they care
twist it
about.
like that.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, high risk. Researchers sounding the alarm on a common procedure used to detect a wide range of diseases. Why they say a CT scan could cause more harm than good. Up first after the break, buyer beware how scammers are trying to use TikTok to cash in America's trade war with China. We'll be right back.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.